Welcome back to tonight's game of Jeopardy! Contestant 3, you have the board. I'll take mental disorders for 200. Fantastic! Well, this disorder can be defined by a lack of attention, an attention deficit, really. Oh, that's an easy one. What is ADHD? Oh, I'm sorry, but that is incorrect. Wait, what? The statement literally said attention deficit. Well, ADHD really isn't an attention deficit. A lot of people don't know that. Then what was the right answer? There wasn't one. I just wanted to shame you on television. Anyway, contestant 1, you have the board now. I'll go for mental disorders for 500. Alright, and that's the Daily Double! This person is the worldwide representative and all-powerful figure of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Excuse me? That's an easy one. Who is Floyd Leech from Twisted Wonderland? And that is correct! You are our winner! Hey, what the hell? That's not how Jeopardy works!
Yeah, it is.
Oh my god, it's Floyd Leech! Very not ironically, I am writing this script while suffering from a major hyperfixation on guess what game, and while having tabs open with completely different scripts on them. I'm working on another script about my love for Twisted Wonderland as a whole, which may or may be out before or after this video, or maybe not at all, I have no idea.
Hey, yeah, so that's not coming out at all.
But funnily enough, I could not focus on that script because while I was writing it, I was just thinking the whole time, man, this ADHD is driving me crazy. You know who else has ADHD? Floyd. Now, I don't think I'm doing anything groundbreaking here. I think it's obvious to everyone who plays Twisted Wonderland that Floyd has ADHD. Like, so obvious that the writers might as well beat you over the head with hammers that make a loud "Floyd has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder" sound each time they hit you. But while yes, we all know it, not everyone plays the game. Conversely, not everyone knows about the ADHD experience past it being an inability to focus. Because let me tell you, it is so much more than that. If it was just that, it wouldn't be as difficult to live with as it is. I feel like people tend to forget that because ADHD is a neurodivergency, it affects everything. And when I say that almost everything Floyd does is an ADHD trait or a gifted trait, I am dead serious. Stuff you might not know is associated with ADHD, namely that specific brand of gifted kid ADHD, is stuff that's just so clear in him to me that, again, it feels like I'm getting beat over the head with it. In a good way, of course. You all know I love me some good mental disorder representation. I really want more people to know these things about growing up with and living with ADHD, and also I love Floyd a lot, like a lot. I've been into Twisted Wonderland for a really long time, and he's always been one of my favorites. Super goofy, super unpredictable, just a pleasure to see on screen every single time. And him being a character who may as well have canonical ADHD, though for clarity, I'm gonna say right now that this is just a headcanon, also adds to his appeal to me. Because living with ADHD, again, isn't easy, but he makes me feel so much better about it. The person who told you that butterflies are the symbol for ADHD lied to you. The symbol is a moray eel, and it's Floyd. This topic's so important to me, so without further ado, and because I'm trying to learn to be more concise even though I'm actually an incoherent yapper, let's get into this.
Hey, yeah, update.
I'm gonna cry, the script is 27 pages long. So, what symptoms of ADHD from the DSM-5 does Floyd have? He's cooked. Well, I don't think he really cares, but he's cooked. ADHD is split into two main subtypes, hyperactive and inattentive. A lot of people with ADHD have a mix of both of these types, so for the purposes of this video, I'm going to go through the symptoms of both of these subtypes in reference to Floyd. Also, for my evidence, I'm going to be referencing, again, the DSM-5 and my own life experiences with ADHD. Keep in mind, my experiences with the disorder will not be the same as that of every single person with it, especially because I'm also going to be talking about giftedness and ADHD. Not everyone with ADHD presents their symptoms in the exact same way or was accommodated for their symptoms in the exact same way, which leads to their ADHD looking pretty different when compared side by side. Even though we have the same disorder, it will be unique because we are unique. For in-game evidence, I'm mostly going to be pulling from Floyd's vignettes, and since they're not voiced, I've gotten Chi to help dub them over to me. Everyone say thank you, Chi, because Chi was so wonderful as Floyd. It made me smile so hard. Also, as a notice, I have not read book 7 yet and probably won't get to it for a while. So if there's any scenes in there that showed Floyd's ADHD like crazy, that's why it wasn't mentioned. If you think you've got an example and you want to share it, put it in the comments. Just make sure you put a spoiler tag on it for me and other people who may see it. Speaking of which, this video won't have any spoilers for stuff other than the vignettes, so feel free to watch wherever you are in the story. At first, I was going to do this in a more straightforward method. I was going to list all of the symptoms in the DSM and go through them one by one, pulling out pieces from the story that showcase those symptoms. But as I was going through Floyd's stuff, I realized, wow, that is going to be extremely ineffective and take me forever, because Floyd is just, so many of his individual lines are just so ADHD coded. And because they're individual lines, a lot of them rely on context. So what we're gonna do is go through some vignettes, talk about them, and then move on to the smaller bits. Does that sound good? Then let's go. First off, we've got the vignette for his school uniform art card. Chit chat a bit. The story opens with Floyd in the library saying,
"Ugh, writing essays is about as exciting as watching a sea anemone race. Isn't there anything better to do around here?"
One line in and I already have to pull out the DSM. Okay. According to the DSM-5, people with ADHD often avoid, dislike, or are reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort. Examples being schoolwork or homework, preparing reports, completing forms, reviewing lengthy papers, stuff like that. With the entire setup of this story being Floyd in the library with a task to do, with schoolwork to do, and then just...
Looky here.
Just where could that book be? I could have sworn that copy of History Unraveled Magic Carpet Weaving was right around here.
He'll work. How's it floating, little goldfish?
Floyd, anyone but him, opting to torment Riddle because it's the more entertaining option for him. It's safe to say Floyd is pretty reluctant to engage in tasks requiring sustained mental effort, tasks he's just not interested in. A huge part of what gets people with ADHD to do the things they need to do is interest, after all. ADHD actually isn't an attention deficit at all. It's actually more of an attention misplacement. People with ADHD can actually have heightened attention compared to those without it, but it's either you're experiencing that heightened attention called hyperfocus, or you're not experiencing much at all. So there is attention, more than normal. It's just about when it's there and where it goes. It can come and go quickly, but when the attention's there, it's incredibly strong, which is why a lot of people with ADHD can become extremely knowledgeable or skilled in specific areas. Their hyperfocus leads them to quickly form abilities it takes others way longer to develop. Anything in the world can be interesting to a given person, and that interest, which leads to hyperfocus, leads to huge gains. But it's still a double-edged sword. When you've got an attention misplacement issue, your attention's gonna be misplaced whether you like it or not. Interesting things will get hyperfocused, but if a task is boring, the opposite is true. It's pretty much a death sentence for whatever the uninteresting task is to ever be completed. At least without discipline, and Floyd is...
釣り糸を垂らして待つ。はい、飽きた。
Plus, even interesting things can become boring, and those with ADHD get bored of them way more quickly. If something's repetitive, it makes these whims even harder to control. And you know, Floyd being sidetracked specifically by Riddle here reflects another symptom, where people with ADHD are often easily distracted by extraneous stimuli, including unrelated thoughts. Riddle for sure counts as extraneous stimuli because I know he is not the topic of that essay Floyd has to write. Since Riddle is the more engaging option here, it's the option Floyd's brain latches on to. And to anyone watching this video who might be thinking, well, isn't it kind of childish or lazy to only do something when you have interest in it? That's the thing though, people with ADHD can't just form motivation for tasks involving little interest out of nowhere. This inability to do so where you find yourself at a standstill is known as executive dysfunction, and it really sucks. Those with autism deal with this too. For those without ADHD, there are other things that can properly motivate them, like responsibility, the will to get things over with, and other internal benefits. With ADHD, it's harder to power through tasks without interest in them in the same way, because our brains are wired in a manner that actively works against us. It makes starting those tasks just about the most difficult thing in the world. These inclinations aren't a product of what we want to do, they're a consequence of how our brain is formed, something that can't be easily controlled. People with ADHD aren't lazy, and it's unproductive to dismiss them as such because someone could really be trying their hardest to start or finish a task, you just can't tell because you're not in their head. But anyway, moving on with the story.
So, are you stuck with some historical junk for homework too?
My business is none of yours.
Oh, don't be like that. I'm bored. So, let's do our homework together. Maybe chit-chat a bit?
I'm bored. Okay, ADHD boy, whatever. Okay, this is a bit of a self-report because I didn't even have to reference the DSM-5 to know that this was a symptom of ADHD. I was actually a little surprised that they listed it, but according to the DSM-5, people with ADHD often interrupt or intrude on others. They butt into conversations, games, or activities. They may start using other people's things without asking permission, and they may intrude into or take over what others are doing. This takes a lot of forms, like the ones listed in the examples here. What Floyd does specifically, going to Riddle when he's clearly doing his own thing and inserting himself because he's bored is prime ADHD. I would know because I do it constantly. Isn't that right, guys?
Yes.
No, seriously, it's so bad. My former roommate and best friend in the whole wide world forever and ever would be over on her side of our room doing her own thing, pretty important things, and I'd be bothering the life out of her with whatever I was doing that I wasn't supposed to be doing. Am I annoying? Yes. Yes, I am. Will I ever stop? No. No, I won't. Do I feel bad about it? A little bit. Moving on!
Anyways, you need that History Unraveled book, right? Just so happens I've been reading it too. Popped it back on that shelf to the far right.
I am perfectly capable of finding it on my own, thank you. Now leave me be.
Uh-huh. Sure you can. Let me show you where it is.
Did you not understand the words that came out of my excuse? Don't pull on me, you. So I feel like the symptom I'm going to reference here could definitely be seen with Floyd in other places, but I'm going to use it now since it's pretty clear for him anyway. People with ADHD are often described as on the go, acting as if driven by a motor. They are unable to be or are uncomfortable being still for extended time, as in restaurants, meetings. Others may see this as being restless or difficult to keep up with. I use this one here because it can also be related to the trait of being intrusive that I just talked about. Now, this description of being driven by a motor mainly references being high energy and unwavering in that energy for sustained periods, which Floyd definitely does. But I feel that this symptom, when combined with the last, creates this hydrogen bomb plus coughing baby effect. When you're intruding on others' activities and you bring this motor-like power to them, you might look a lot like Floyd. Floyd is overwhelming, with Riddle being swept up and bounced around like a ping pong ball Floyd sending back and forth all on his own. The intrusion and this motor-like energy that Floyd has are combining, resulting in him making Riddle feel like he's riding on the fast lane. Unfortunately, I can't say I've never done this. It's an accident every time, I promise. Apologies to every friend that I've ever grabbed and shaken like a maraca. The rest of the story shows Floyd, again, just tormenting Riddle, specifically for his height, because he's an absolute jerk. Placing the book Riddle needs on a higher shelf, not letting Riddle get a stool to get it himself, and then after Riddle opts to just grab it with magic, Floyd runs off with it, forcing Riddle to chase him.
Yoink!
Wait, no! You can't do that! Hand it over!
I don't know.
Are you really that eager to lose your head?
Oh no, I'm shaking in my boots. Better make a run for it.
Running is forbidden in the library! It may not be one of the Queen's laws, but it's still very much against the rules, Floyd!
Not up for playing tag with me? 'Cause you're it, little goldfish. Catch me if you can.
I am absolutely not it! I have just about had it up to here with your antics!
Come on, catch me, catch me. I'll give you the book if you do.
Ugh, stop running around! Gonna drop a quick one here. People with ADHD often run about or climb in situations where it is inappropriate. This one can be seen as a stretch because it can also be chalked up to Floyd not really caring about following rules in the library, rather than not being conscious of his environment due to the fun he's having, which is what the symptom is actually referring to. But I personally see this as a mix of both of these factors, so I'm including it anyway, baby. Getting fed up, Riddle starts to lecture Floyd. Jade has never once pulled these silly pranks, and he's had every opportunity as a classmate. How twins could be such complete opposites, I'll never understand. Why must you always tell me, Floyd? What have I done to deserve this mistreatment?
I'm bored.
What? The way Floyd pops out of this conversation once he starts to get lectured is a great example of inattention. People with ADHD often do not seem to listen when spoken to directly. Their mind seems elsewhere, even in the absence of any obvious distraction. Floyd just completely lost interest, so he's zoned out with what Riddle is saying. He stops what he's doing, chills out, and leaves out of nowhere. Though I do have to say, even if it doesn't relate to the topic of this video, that Floyd's mood swing here could also be because he was just compared to Jade in a negative way. I'm not gonna get into it because wow, that would take a while, but if this isn't him popping out due to inattention, it's indicative of another interesting part of his character. One we can't get into, but one nonetheless. Also, I'm just gonna say, as a person with ADHD, being compared to someone like Jade would in fact make me tweak out a little bit. Like, if I was in this position where someone was saying, why can't you just be normal like this person who can actually get things done and is efficient and is calm and is focused, I would go a little crazy. Either way, Floyd definitely experiences inattention because, well, have you seen that boy when he's in class? Plus, mood swings are also a big part of ADHD, one we'll acknowledge more in a bit. This bewildering change of pace from Floyd is a great example of how quickly the heightened attention and excitement of a person with ADHD can slip away. 1 second, Floyd is having the time of his life, and the next he's bored out of his mind. This is reflective of another symptom, that being, people with ADHD often have difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play activities. They have difficulty remaining focused during lectures, conversations, or lengthy reading. The important part here is that this trait also includes play activities, which you wouldn't think would be a part of it. If a person is doing something fun, how are they still having trouble focusing? Well, even if ADHD is heavily based on interest, again, anyone can lose interest in anything after a while. And people with ADHD lose it more quickly. So this symptom still links up with the story. Even if Floyd was having fun, his attention could still slip away. And again, even if this moment is based on Floyd being compared to Jade rather than inattention exclusively, it still showcases that quick switch from one state to the other. From here, Floyd chills out, hands Riddle the book, and leaves. Riddle remarks about this possibly being another one of Floyd's mood swings, or maybe it was about something he said, and then the story ends. This story is absolutely wonderful for showing off Floyd's ADHD traits. It shows a lot of them, and some pretty key ones to the disorder too. It's also just really goofy. I absolutely love the dynamic between Riddle and Floyd. I think it's so hilarious. So this story is really fun for me. But god, that was like more than 3 pages of a script for just a single R card vignette. Good god, he's got ADHD and he's got it bad. Speaking of his erratic behaviors though, let's talk more about those, since they're a huge part of ADHD you don't see represented as often. At least not as often as characters not being able to pay attention or just being easily distracted. This next one's one of my favorite vignettes of his because I think it shows a lot of relatable aspects about Floyd's ADHD, his moodiness, and also a whole other disorder. We're not gonna go through the entire story like we did for the first, but I've still got a lot to say. Trust me, I have way too much to say. Next up, we've got Floyd's Labco SR vignettes. This is the pits, man. 1 and 2. Mostly 1. Our story opens up with Floyd getting chewed out by Professor Cruel. He's not very responsive, just standing there listening to him go on.
Floyd Leech, would you care to explain yourself?
When Cruel points out his indifference, Floyd finally responds, mocking Cruel for the way he's talking down to him and telling him to stop nagging.
How long are you going to stay silent? Even puppies bark back when spoken to.
Roo. There. Are we done yet, or did you have more barbs to sling my way? All this nagging's really harshing my vibe.
You're bold, younger Leech. I'll give you that much.
I ain't younger. I ain't older either, but come on.
I suggest you exercise more discretion in deciding who you bear your fangs at. You bad dog!
Saying this to, you know, his professor. Turns out the reason Cruel was mad wasn't just because Floyd was talking back to him, but because Floyd turned in a paper completely blank, even though he got a perfect 100% on his last assignment. This, I thought, was interesting. Super interesting. Because while it isn't a trait specifically listed on the DSM's diagnostic criteria for ADHD, being oppositional due to the differences between the person with ADHD's mind and the structures surrounding them is a pretty common thing. I know this from both the DSM and my experience growing up with the disorder. Starting with my own experience, I grew up in the gifted program, and either way, I did actually really like learning because it was really active. I was always really excited to write papers in English, listen to history lessons, learn about science, and though I said I absolutely despised it, I had math come naturally to me if I actually applied myself instead of just refusing to do anything because it was overwhelming. Unless it was fractions. I was genuinely horrible at fractions. Overall, I love to learn, like many gifted kids with ADHD. Learning is engaging. ADHD needs engagement. But despite that, I absolutely hated, and I mean despised doing worksheets, reading assignments, and especially homework. More than the average kid. So much so that I would scream and cry to my mom every single night, refusing to do anything. And if she'd force me, understandably so, I'd cry the whole time and beg every few seconds for her to let me stop. I have a really vivid memory of having to read a book for homework one night. It took us hours to get through around 20 pages because every paragraph I started to cry from frustration. When I had assignments like these, the next day I'd show up to class and turn in a completely blank worksheet or reading log. Then I'd cry again or get mad or turn my brain off and repeat the same behavior next time I had homework. The adults in my life thought I'd learn eventually with experience, but I didn't, because it wasn't something I could just unlearn. It was a product of neurodivergency. I say this to get across that when I read this scene, I related to Floyd so extremely hard. What he does here is the exact thing that I've done my whole childhood. I hated doing worksheets so much because genuinely they felt like a complete waste of my time. I already knew everything, so why was I doing extra work? This idea still eludes me to this day, honestly. The repetition of worksheets might help some kids learn, but for me and other kids with ADHD, they just serve to plummet our grades and make us feel like complete failures. If we had assignments that stimulated us properly, we would have done incredibly well. Using the same tactics on us that they use on neurotypical kids just ended up frustrating us. And you know what? I don't think the mindless worksheets benefited those kids either, but I wouldn't know for sure since I don't have any neurotypical people in my life I can ask. And what Floyd is doing in this scene reminds me of all that really hard. He's at a standstill because of his boredom. He could definitely do it and do it well, but he refuses to because of what the task is. It isn't engaging to him, not at all. So he deems it as not worth his time and just hands it in blank, much like I did before. And Floyd, though impulsive, really is that smart. Later in the same story, Jade, Floyd's sibling, if you couldn't tell, says this about him.
He's awfully taciturn today. Is he in another one of his snits?
Mm-hmm. He occasionally has episodes like this. Today seems to be hitting him especially hard.
He's too moody by half, if you ask me. Is there a reason for it?
Hard to say. For Floyd, anything could be the switch that sets him off. Problems and pet peeves have no bearing on it. My brother is simply an eccentric genius. Sometimes he can pull off spells that amaze his teachers, and sometimes he produces so little that they chastise him in their frustration.
How troublesome that must be.
This scene is made so much more meaningful because Floyd is known to be intelligent through these actions. Because with ADHD, there's this misconception that the disorder makes us entirely unable to do well in school. But gifted people with ADHD, like I've tried to convince you already, are extremely smart. Also, gifted with ADHD is kind of redundant because if you weren't put in the gifted system and you had ADHD, they kind of messed up because the gifted system the whole time was just code for neurodivergent. Did you guys know that? Because I learned that way too late in life. Seeing Floyd, Mr. ADHD himself, who doesn't pay attention in class and hates being told to do his work, getting perfect scores the second he feels like applying himself, to some it doesn't match up with ADHD symptoms, but if you think about hyperfocus the way I described it earlier, it's the uncontrollable trump card that helps people with ADHD go further a lot faster. If we're engaged, we're going to do well and probably exceed expectations along the way. He doesn't really have to try, yet he does extremely well when he applies himself. Minimal effort, maximum gains. It's the curse of being ADHD gifted. You've got the chops, maybe even more than the chops, yet your brain leaves you feeling unable to reach your full potential. It's like you can fly, but you have a huge ball and chain on you, so like there's like kind of no point. All of that is based on my personal experience with being ADHD gifted and my personal experience with being defiant due to ADHD. Kicking and screaming about not wanting to do assignments because they were working against my brain's wiring. As for the DSM, there's a section surrounding comorbidity of ADHD and other disorders. Two of the disorders mentioned here are oppositional defiant disorder, also called ODD, and conduct disorder. ODD centers around being uncooperative, rowdy, and well, oppositional. Basically, Sarukawa Kei from Charisma House. And conduct disorder centers around antisocial behaviors, including bullying, consistently breaking the law, and some other really heinous stuff. I'm not gonna go deep into conduct disorder because this is not that kind of game, but you can definitely see some reflections of ODD in him. There are 8 symptoms in total, with 4 needing to be present for the possibility of a diagnosis, and I think Floyd reflects 5 of them the most clearly. Some symptoms of oppositional defiant disorder that I think relate to Floyd are 1. Easily losing one's temper. 2. Being touchy or easily annoyed. 3. Often arguing with authority figures. 4. Often defying rules or refusing to comply with the requests of authority figures. In Floyd's case, I think this goes for anyone's requests. And 5. Deliberately annoying others, like we see him do when he toys with Riddle. In the scene where Floyd talks back to Cruel, he's being super oppositional, talking back, refusing to do his work, general stuff like that. Now, does that mean that me and every single other kid with ADHD being oppositional was a product of ODD? No, I don't think so, and I'll get to that in a bit. But as for Floyd, he matches up way too closely with the disorder for this behavior to just be a product of his ADHD. It looks similar, but it isn't the same. For example, in his vignette called I Like It, obviously, but we see Floyd be asked by Ace to play basketball on his team since Floyd is like super good at the game. Once the match starts, however, Floyd calls it quits. And because Floyd hates being told what to do, and Ace is yapping at him to get on with the game, bro, Floyd's mood takes a swan dive. He starts to tell Ace off, threatening him with physical violence. He really does not like being told what to do.
I'll snatch that ball, thanks. Floyd, I'm sending it your way.
Hey, I said I'm passing it to you. Quick staring into space and grab...
I'm bored.
What? Oh, hold up. Floyd, what happened to those crazy skills you were just showing off?
Oh, this is such a drag. I quit.
What the heck, man?
I'm not in a basketball mood.
But you were totally in the zone like 3 seconds ago!
Yeah, I had fun and now I'm done.
Dude, quit being so lazy and make with the dunking already!
You are really starting to get on my nerves. How about I squeeze you until you can't whine anymore?
Ugh, that was terrifying. What's this guy's deal?
And his reaction to it isn't just, no, I don't want to do this. It's, if you make me do this, I'm going to bite you. He isn't just frustrated, he is angry and ready to use that anger. Also, in Floyd's Tropical Wear SSR vignette, he says this.
I mean, come on. When someone tells you not to do something, that just makes you want to do it even more, right?
This one line isn't a surefire sign that he has an entire disorder. I just thought to include it because it's cartoonishly ODD and funny to me. Because of the way Floyd reacts to being told what to do and the way he tends to get really annoyed and angry and how he likes to mess with other people, I definitely put him in the ADHD and ODD camp. But on this note, I've got kind of a huge tangent, so you can skip to the timestamp on screen now to breeze past this. I want to take time to mention that I think it's crucial to question why ODD is found to be comorbid with ADHD most commonly in studies, with them bringing results stating that almost half of those with ADHD have ODD. This isn't about Floyd because I do think ODD applies to him and does come comorbid with his ADHD, but it's important to note that psychology isn't the greatest field when it comes to, let's say, a lack of researchers jumping to conclusions, or stereotyping, or ignorance. Ironically, it can be a pretty ableist field. With this point specifically, I think it's odd that the first disorder here listed is ODD. This is just something that looked fishy to me personally, so take all of this with a grain of salt, by the way. This isn't to say that people with ADHD can't actually have ODD. They certainly can, and that's completely fine. But the fact that we have more research that says that people with ADHD often have ODD than we do for a lot of other disorders shows the bias of those researching the disorder in these studies. It's not an impossibility that half of ADHD have ODD, but when you think about how stereotypes work from those who don't have the disorder in question, that starts to kind of fall apart, because unfortunately stereotypes are what comes to the mind first, and they can mess up statistics. These high numbers point to an idea among researchers that people with ADHD who act oppositionally must be doing so because they have ODD. This starts out because of a neglectful idea that those with ADHD speaking out are just being oppositional, and then that becomes propagated by itself, ignoring other factors that may be causing these similar behaviors. These patients may not have ODD, they may just be, I don't know, expressing frustration that they're in an environment that doesn't even try to help them work with their ADHD. And these people, who are often children, don't know how to voice these frustrations outside of, I don't want to do this, which leads to more ideas that those with ADHD who complain just have ODD, all because we aren't looking deeper than that. It's incredibly important to make these distinctions. We see the same thing occur with age and gender gender in these studies. I'm even doing it right now by focusing so much on schooling and early youth. The diagnostic criteria for ADHD found in the DSM should not be so focused on work or schooling when it isn't the only environment people with ADHD are found in. We're not just being disruptive at school and at work, we're being disruptive everywhere, thank you very much. While these settings help for identifying certain symptoms of the disorders, they definitely don't identify all of them. And that leads to us not talking about the parts of ADHD that are a detriment to our lives outside of these areas. As for gender, research shows a strong bias towards boys. Researchers say that they have ADHD more often than girls do, and that girls have hyperactive type way less frequently than them. But this certainly is not true. The reason boys have their ADHD identified and treated more often is because when they're loud and rowdy, they get time and attention put into research. But when girls are loud and rowdy, they need to behave and act more their age. This isn't a rule of thumb, but it's a more common occurrence. When I learned I had ADHD, I was shocked as to how my teachers didn't point it out sooner. The boys who acted like me got it pointed out, but I didn't. I was just told that I was being loud, annoying, that I had to sit down, behave, and shut up. I'm not saying I wasn't being disruptive, but it was absolutely a double standard. When boys do it, they're just different. But when girls do it, we're not good enough girls, I guess. I don't know. This might be some crazy conspiracy type of thing, but I don't think it is. If anything, I just think that these studies should always be taken with a grain of salt. Always be critical of what you read, because seriously, ableism is everywhere. And either way, being critical of anything you consume is good, especially if it affects the lives of people around you. But anyway, this video is not just a big mental health nerd rant, it's also about Floyd Leech. So let me curb my own ADHD and let's get back on track. ADHD on its own also severely impacts a person's mood, because when your train of thought, levels of stimulation, and energy spikes are all over the place, yeah, I'm not too sure, but I think that would mess with how you feel. Floyd's mood dropped completely in that first story we looked at the second he lost interest in messing with Riddle. And if you play the game, you know that this is a frequent occurrence for Floyd anyway. His mood is constantly shifting. In Jade's conversation with Riddle I showed earlier, he mentions that Floyd has always been like this. Anything could be the cause of a mood swing, and that mood swing can be rough. That's so relatable to me, because when it comes to focus specifically, if I lose it in an activity, it makes me feel kind of empty and aimless. It's a huge change to experience, and it can either burn you out or make you feel really, really frustrated. The opposite is also true. A person with ADHD can go from feeling downright miserable to over the moon excited. Outside of that, I'm not actually 100% sure why these mood swings happen. That was just me trying to put a face to a mystery monster. Also, because of this volatile emotional state, genetics, and traumatic experiences in early life, ADHD is often comorbid with other disorders that affect a person's mood, like disruptive mood dysregulation disorder in children and adolescents, and major depressive disorder. It can also be comorbid with other disorders not specifically linked to mood, like autism spectrum disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and so on. Personality disorders are a big one from what I can tell. I personally have ADHD and BPD, aka borderline personality disorder. I've got a video on that if you'd like to check it out. Please watch it. I also have another friend with ADHD who has bipolar disorder. If you have ADHD, whether or not you have a mood disorder, you're probably still gonna have like really bad mood swings. It's really rough, and not a lot of people talk about it, so I really, really love that they show this in Floyd, even though he doesn't have canonical ADHD. He might as well. I can't believe the best ADHD representation we have isn't even canon. The rest of the story shows Floyd's low mood, with nothing being able to drag him out of it. He doesn't do anything he'd usually be interested in, like messing with Riddle or getting on people who pick fights with him.
My mood's in the gutter. I've got no energy. This is the pits, man.
Ow! Hey, who thinks they can just bump into me without apologizing or... Floyd! Sorry, we didn't know it was you. Look, we don't want any trouble, so...
Huh? Nah, I don't feel like starting any.
Wait, really?
I said it's cool, okay? So how about you scram already before you make me want to ruin your day, too?
You're going now!
I'm wiped.
Because he just is so done with the day, completely worn out and fatigued. Okay, now this isn't an official thing about ADHD, just something from the personal experience of others and my own with the disorder, but for some, ADHD can cause excessive midday crashes where we feel fatigued and maybe, not always, upset. I'm not exactly sure what the reason is. Some say it's a result of those with ADHD exhausting their minds after the first half of the day since our brains are overactive, and others say it's because of poor sleep since many of us have issues with it quiet or even full-blown sleep disorders. But regardless, midday crashes happen, and they happen bad. You can make the argument that with Floyd, it was just because of what happened with Cruel, and that makes the most sense since it's what was intended from a writing standpoint. But while Floyd is obviously experiencing the brunt of this slump because of this interaction with Cruel, before that, you can tell he seemed pretty down too. What I think it is that Floyd was already feeling crummy because he was at the low point of the day, and that moment just made everything worse. When you're already feeling bad, the smallest thing can make it seem even more unbearable. I get how it feels, and man, it sucks. Dude, reading this story makes me feel like I'm grabbing Floyd by the shoulder, looking at the camera and going, "Me and the bestie!" Not that I or many people could reach his shoulder. Anyway, Floyd's mood doesn't shift again until Ace and Deuce end up flinging color-changing magic straight at him. Floyd ends up covered in dye, but he isn't angry. Despite the low mood that caused him to be excited by next to nothing, he actually starts laughing and having a good time. Sure, it's at Ace and Deuce, but he's back in a good mood, even offering to teach them how to do magic right for fun. This story is a wonderful display of how ADHD mood swings can affect a person. Granted, not all of us with ADHD are Floyd, but he's so relatable. And I love how the story depicts both characters who get him, like Jade, and characters who don't, like everyone else. It's super realistic without being overly negative, all while keeping the same goofy vibe that I love Twisted Wonderland for. No, seriously, if you asked me what game stories I liked the most, I would have to answer Twisted Wonderland. I honestly have so much trouble focusing with others. I love them all, but it is so hard to pay attention when the ways the stories are presented are just so slow and stiff at times. I know better than to say that games like D4DJ that I love are completely boring. That might actually be in second place compared to this one. But that's the thing. To me, Twisted Wonderland very rarely or never has these dull moments. I love everything about the story and the lighthearted, infinitely fun. Whoa! Oh my god! Okay, oh my god, not again. We're not doing this again. Okay, we're done. I also love so much how this story in particular comes back full circle. It starts with him not wanting to do schoolwork, not even slightly, and it ends with him indulging in teaching magic himself outside of an assignment. He's doing something similar while being upset in one location and beaming in another. The message is really powerful. Floyd isn't dumb just because he didn't fill out the assignment. It's something we've already made really clear, but that drives it home and it's so natural and I love it. By no means am I saying that him knowing everything makes it okay that he's not doing his work. Do your work, kids! But it's telling. What he's learning isn't the problem for Floyd, it's the environment and how it makes him feel. It's the way he's made to engage with the stuff. Functionally, Floyd is said to have been doing well academically in both the first scene and the last. I love it. It feels relatable and empathetic and I love it. I love Floyd and I love this story. Now we're on to the last big story I want to discuss. Floyd's SSR Beans camo vignette stories called Nowhere Near the Best. This section's a little shorter than the other two, but it's still decently sized to the point that I couldn't shove it into the shorter bits we're gonna finish off with. So let's go. In this story, there are a few more things that I think point to Floyd having ADHD. Firstly, he's very reward driven, a huge motivator for people with the disorder. In the story, we see him moving forward ahead of everyone else because he really wants to get his hands on some cool Beans Day gear. It gets him super motivated to defeat people along the way and make a ton of progress. But once he gets the gear, he taps out again, leaving everyone else to fend for themselves because it would be boring otherwise. Another detail I noticed was kinda related to the story, kinda not, where Floyd talks about having gone to land boot camp while under the sea. He mentioned how he didn't like it at all, because they were just teaching him stuff that he already knew because he picked it up from Azul and Jade. That's so neat. It must have been an exciting month for you. I remember before my orientation, I was so antsy about what life would be like here I could barely sleep.
Nah, boot camp sucked royally.
What? Why?
Everything they went over in class was stuff I'd already picked up from Azul and Jade.
I don't think I have to restate why this makes him look like an ADHDer. You get the point. The other part of this that interested me was when Floyd mentioned something that actually impacted him when he got on land.
What surprised me was how heavy my body felt when I came out of the water.
Now he's a dancer, he plays basketball, he's super agile on land. But when he first got on it a little over a year ago, that was a super hard experience to get used to. Not only does this show how well people with ADHD can adapt to a new, interesting experience, it also shows us that Floyd, like many with ADHD, is a kinesthetic learner. If you don't know, there are three main types of learners: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. Auditory learners do best when listening to lectures and recordings. Visual learners do best with notes, writing, charts. Boring people! Boring people! Boring people! You're so boring! Whew, sorry. I don't know what came over me. Visual learners are boring, by the way. And kinesthetic learners are those who learn through experiencing what they're learning. It's also called multisensory learning, so just from the name alone, it makes a lot of sense that the style works well for those with ADHD. It engages multiple senses at once, creating a varied experience that a person is less likely to trail off in. A good example would be someone who doesn't know how to do a math problem after hearing someone tell them how to do it or looking at examples in graphs, but can successfully do it after they've tested it out and played around. I feel like math is a bad example because that's how most people learn math specifically, but I hope you get what I mean anyway. Floyd not caring for what the rest of the Lamb boot camp had to offer is apparent. Not only does he flat out say it to the audience in the story, but he even mentions how they did tell him about land food being different there, yet he burned his mouth chugging down a bowl of boiling soup anyway.
So, what do they teach you at land boot camp?
All the basics. For starters, you're supposed to wear clothes. Fire bad. Stuff like that. Then there's how to breathe, how to walk properly. Yeah, and all sorts of info about land food. I still remember the first time we had a hot meal. I chugged this whole bowl of boiling soup and burned the inside of my mouth.
On his wiki page, it says that Floyd has the ability to perfectly recall anything he's seen or read. However, if he's not interested in the subject matter, he'll quickly forget it completely. This is probably in reference to the SR vignette from his Vargas camp card, where he learned about stuff like poisonous mushrooms just from a glance at the page. But he said that since he doesn't care much, he'll probably forget all those details sooner or later. So this isn't to say that Floyd can't learn stuff through visuals or audio, but that Floyd's main method of learning is definitely kinesthetic. Oh, and that reminds me, Floyd burning himself on the soup can also be reflective of another symptom of ADHD, being that people with ADHD often fail to give close attention to details or make careless mistakes in schoolwork, at work, or during other activities. They overlook or miss details, or their work is inaccurate. This chugging of the soup is definitely a careless and keyword impulsive mistake. Whether or not he remembered the detail in question, that the soup would burn him, jumping in full force like that can definitely be described as careless. But anyway, back to my main point. The fact that Floyd is a kinesthetic learner is highlighted potently by describing that he didn't care at all for the Lamb boot camp, but instead the sensations associated with actually being out of the ocean. Hearing about it did nothing for him. Reading about it did nothing for him. But actually being there and actively having to adapt to it did. So yeah, that's all for this story that makes me think Floyd has ADHD.
So, I practiced for 2 days straight until I could pull off a totally sweet dunk of my own. I skipped class that whole time and didn't come back to my dorm at night. My teachers and the old house warden chewed my head off, but hey, worth it.
2 days straight? Without even stopping to sleep?
Yeah, like I said, I can do whatever I put my mind to.
That's not putting your mind to something. That's just brute forcing it until you succeed.
Okay, ADHD boy, whatever you say. Hyperfocus much, bro? That's like really bad. Hyperfocus much? Apparently so, because in, again, Floyd's Tropical Wear SSR story, Azul says to Floyd that,
My word, when you put your mind to something you want to do, your focus is incredible.
they've known each other since they were kids, guys. This means Floyd has a habit of hyperfocusing on random things he wants to do. My ADHD hyperfocusing kid! Also, not getting as much sleep due to hyperfocus or otherwise is a huge thing for ADHDers, like it was for Floyd when he was motivated with basketball. Okay, so after going through those 3 vignettes, finally, let's finish off with some even smaller moments. This will be quicker summaries and some short scenes. Let's run through them. In his SR Ceremonial Robes vignette story called Yeah, No, I'm Good, Floyd is helping out Kaleem by playing the drums at this banquet he's hosting. He denies the request at first because he doesn't feel like it, but then Kaleem tells him, hey, it's fine bro, don't feel forced if you help, you can just do whatever. Upon hearing this, Floyd is like, okay. So he helps out, but halfway through drumming, he gets bored, eloquently stating, this is boring, I'm bored, drumming is cancelled, yeets. Did they actually translate an official Disney game like this? So he gets up and starts dancing with everyone else instead. Azul is there to confirm to Jamil that yes, Floyd has always been like this. No, like literally he's done this exact same thing, quitting drumming and chucking his sticks to dance, multiple times. This story is a great example of a few symptoms of ADHD, but 2 we haven't discussed yet, being that people with ADHD often leave their seats in situations where remaining seated is expected. This happens in the classroom, in the office or workplaces, or in situations that just require remaining in place. And people with ADHD often do not follow through on instructions and fail to finish schoolwork, chores, or duties in the workplace. They start tasks but quickly lose focus and are easily sidetracked. This also displays some of the symptoms I mentioned earlier, like the one about being driven by a motor, being unable to keep attention even in play activities, and being distracted by extraneous stimuli, in this case, the dancing. Okay, this isn't a moment in a story, just an image. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a single image tell us something about a character's neurological disorder? The image is his room. This is his room. Man, nothing here is where it's supposed to be. Both pair of shoes that we can see look like they were just thrown around separately. The rug isn't aligned with the bed. The bed isn't made. The shelf is a wreck. The closet door's open. What is he doing? Damn fish, you live like this? Imagine being that disorganized. Please don't look at my room. People with ADHD tend to live in extremely chaotic spaces. I'm one of the most organized people that I know with the disorder, and I'm still an absolute mess. This reflects the symptom that people with ADHD often have difficulty organizing tasks and activities, difficulty managing sequential tasks, difficulty keeping materials and belongings in order. That's the important one there. They have messy, disorganized work, have poor time management, and they fail to meet deadlines. His belongings are certainly not in order, at least not in order someone who isn't him can see. I get that though, because in my messy space, I know where everything is and what I'm going to do with my mess. I've got it under control, and I don't think organizing it has any value. Like, if I know where everything is, why do I have to make it look good? I don't care how it looks if I have to waste my time moving around stuff that I'm okay with being all over the place. Okay, that edit was a joke, but Floyd has said this before.
アズールがシャツにアイロンがけしろってうるさいんだ。着れればいいじゃん。
Which is literally the exact same sentiment that I just shared. There's this logic I see often with people who have ADHD that if A works out, why care about B? B's useless to put time into, and A's the only part that really matters, so I don't want to do it. Personally, I have zero motivation to ever make my bed because there's literally no reason to. Like, if I'm just gonna mess it up again tonight, why do I have to make it? I don't care if you say it feels better. I literally could not care less about your opinion on how I feel in my bed. Hey kids, don't listen to me. Speaking of this mess, one of Floyd's dorm uniform voice lines is,
またストールがどっか行った。ジェイドの勝手に持ってきたけどすぐにバレるよな。
A consequence of this messy lifestyle and all over the place mental state is losing things, and that's another thing listed on the DSM. People with ADHD often lose things necessary for tasks or activities. School materials, pencils, books, tools, wallets, keys, paperwork, eyeglasses. They wanted to list so many things why there was no point. Floyd also has another voice line saying,
実験着の洗濯し忘れてたから今日はジェイドの借りてんな。
This is a symptom where people with ADHD are often forgetful in daily activities, doing chores, running errands, returning calls, paying bills, keeping appointments. Floyd just forgot to clean it, so now he's making that Jade's problem. Him taking Jade's coat is also super impulsive, something that's heavily associated with ADHD, like very, very heavily. If you've got ADHD or know someone in your life with a disorder, you know how impulsive we can be. I don't think we need to address that for Floyd since, well, he's probably the most impulsive character in this game. His pet peeve is literally listed as restraint. But if you need an even clearer example, this voice line's a great one.
バスケ部に入った理由？あの日はそういう気分だっただけ。今日なら軽音部入ってたかも。
Literally a textbook impulsive decision maker. Yeah, I did this thing because I felt like it, but if I could go back, I'd totally change what I did. Dude, I have 4 letters for you. Okay, now this one might be me reaching a little bit because I'm trying to include as many symptoms as I can, but I still think it's worth mentioning if a bit goofy. So a symptom of ADHD is fidgeting with or tapping hands or feet or squirming in one's seat. Obviously, it's pretty hard to get evidence for this one since Twisted Wonderland is a visual novel styled game. There aren't many animations of the characters yet since the anime isn't out either. All we really have are the sprites in the game. So, you see how most characters like Jade in this frame here are standing perfectly still while Floyd is just like he's like swaying around. Yeah, that's all I've got. Okay, another thing kind of related to ADHD is the way Floyd talks really fast with little to no pauses. Listen how he speaks in this voice line.
打ち合わせ中、海猫くんのポエムが始まってさ。意味わかんねえし超投げしてうんざり。陸の食べ物って変わってるよね。 たこ焼きなんて中身ドロドロで超熱くて最初に食った時衝撃だったわ。
He literally does not stop to catch his breath, meshing everything together like the kind of person who writes without commas. Remember how I said that people with ADHD's brains move too fast for their bodies to keep up with? A big side effect of that is talking really quickly. You've got so many thoughts moving so fast that to get them out, you have to move fast too. I wouldn't know anything about this symptom though because I don't have it at all.
R5 つで退場って少なすぎじゃね？俺、最初から最後まで試合に出てたことねえんだけど。
For a minute I forgot why I included this one and was just ready to sit back and laugh, but this is a huge example of how Floyd takes things at his own pace so hard that it becomes an issue with following instructions.
It's nice she calls me for my birthday, but boy can Mama talk my ear off. How many times I gotta hear the same stories about when I was little?
Floyd, buddy, I've got some bad news for you. A symptom of ADHD is talking excessively, and ADHD is genetic. So now we know you got it from your mama, which, oh my god, I think that is so cute. In part 26 of book 4, Floyd and Jamil are playing Mancala against each other. Jamil says to Floyd that he's tough competition when he's focused. Need I say more? Jamil did it for me.
結果が分かってることってやる気になんない。もっと面白いことしよう。
Do I even have to say anything? I think you guys can connect the dots for this one, but you know, something new and novel, that's what he wants. He has no motivation if it's something repetitive. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD.
釣り糸を垂らして待つ。はい、飽きた。こんなだるいのやめて別のことしない？
Yeah, fishing is like the most anti-ADHD activity ever, especially freshwater fishing. Like, why am I here to sit, do nothing, and wait for dopamine if I'm not at least open to seeing a shark? But yeah, sitting and doing literally nothing but waiting is to ADHD what bird-unfriendly architecture is to pigeons. And as if his ADHD wasn't already this in your face, Floyd has a voice line where he outright says,
じーっと並んでると飽きるよね。
Do I even need to explain this one? I think we can infer. Alright, now that we've gone through all that, let's talk about if he actually could have it or not. Around 6 symptoms for each type, so 12 in total for combined type, from the DSM-5 surrounding ADHD, need to be fulfilled for a patient to be considered for the disorder. And based on this video, yeah, Floyd's psychiatrist has got a lot of considering to do. This guy's got it rough, and he doesn't even care. Floyd is a character that has always meant so much to me. Not for any deep reason or anything, but just because for all the time I've loved Twisted Wonderland, he's always made me smile. He's so eccentric and goofy and insane. All things I absolutely adore. And he's so relatable. Like, I know this is the funny word, but I actually feel a strong kinship with him. He reflects how I've grown up and how I still experience the world. He isn't me, he's actually way different in a lot of ways, but that makes me love him even more. I know it's stupid, but do you ever look at a fictional character and go, that's my best friend. That's my best friend right there. And no, I don't mean this in a jokey way. I'm serious. Obviously, I don't think he's my actual best friend. He isn't real, but if he was, I'd never want to leave his side. And even if he's not, that's still the case. I love this character, and I want to experience him for as long as Twisted Wonderland exists. Hi, so I'm re-recording this ending part, so this isn't scripted. Usually I do still script these little ending bits, but I removed a big chunk of the end of this video because I got like really sappy, but I realized that the way I was explaining things didn't really make sense, and if I couldn't do like a whole sappy part justice, I'm just not gonna put it in. I couldn't explain it well, and it didn't fit in with the rest of the video anyway. Plus, this is already way too long, so. But seriously, thank you so much for watching. It means a lot. This is my longest video yet. It was going to be like almost an hour, but I cut some parts out, so it's a bit shorter. I hope the length didn't turn any people off from watching, but I am so tired right now editing this. I don't know if you could tell because the editing is like really minimal. It was draining the life out of me. I had so much fun writing this script though. It was so much fun. If I see you again, have a good day, but if I won't see you again, have a good life. Make sure to keep living because it's the only way things can get better. See you in 2025. Bye!